Hey, young boy, what are you doing under the rain?
The man said it without looking up from his phone. We don't rent to problems. His thumb kept scrolling, blue light washing over his knuckles. The boy stood there, wet jacket darkened by rain, fingers pressed tight around the strap of a frayed backpack. He nodded once, like he'd expected it, like the sentence had been rehearsed somewhere inside him long before it landed. The clerk's voice carried the bored certainty of someone who knew the power of a counter between them. Next. The lobby smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. Outside, traffic hissed through standing water. Monica Reed paused just inside the doorway, her cleaning badge still clipped to her collarbone, her hands aching from hours of wringing cloths dry. She watched the boy turn, watched the way he kept his shoulders square as if dignity were something you could hold up by muscle alone. He didn't ask for mercy. He didn't argue. He stepped back into the rain as though it had been waiting for him. Monica felt something small and sharp settle behind her ribs. It wasn't anger yet. It was recognition. She knew that posture. She knew what it took to keep it. The clerk finally glanced up at her. His eyes moved quickly, already deciding. "We're full," he said, even though the key rack behind him was half empty. Monica opened her mouth and closed it again. The boy was already at the door, water running off his hair, his shoes leaving small, dark crescents on the tile. Outside, thunder rolled, distant but steady. Monica thought of the note taped to her fridge at home, written in her son's careful block letters. "Mom, I did my homework." She thought of the envelope on the counter with final notice stamped in red. She thought of the way people talked about choices as if they were always clean. She stepped forward. "I'll pay for a room," she said, her voice surprising her with how steady it sounded. The clerk looked at her then, really looked, as if reassessing the math. "One night," she added quickly, "just one." The boy turned back. His eyes were dark and watchful, not hopeful. The clerk shrugged, already reaching for the card reader. "ID?" he asked the boy. Monica slid her card across the counter. "Use mine." The machine beeped, the sound too loud in the small space. The boy's hands trembled when he took the key. He didn't smile, he swallowed. "Thank you," he said once, then again softer, like he was trying to make it count. Monica shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. She watched him disappear down the hall, watched the clerk return to his phone, the moment already gone. Outside, the rain kept falling. Monica stood there a second longer than she needed to, then pushed back into the night, the weight of the decision settling in her pocket where the receipt would crumple. She told herself she could afford one night. She told herself it was nothing. The city didn't agree. As she walked toward the bus stop, she felt the familiar tightening of worry, the arithmetic of tomorrow already rearranging itself. Somewhere behind her, a door closed. The boy was safe for the night. That would have to be enough. She didn't know she was being watched from the second-floor window, a face pressed close to the glass, a quiet vow forming where fear had been. She didn't know that this moment would follow her. She only knew the rain on her face and the tired certainty that kindness had a cost. I spent a long time shaping this story because moments like this matter. If stories about justice, kindness, and quiet strength mean something to you too, you're welcome to stay with me. If you had been standing there when this happened, would you have spoken up or stayed silent? The next day began with fluorescent lights and the smell of burnt coffee. Monica arrived early to the office she cleaned at night and now worked in by day, the downtown high-rise that tried to look newer than it was. She kept her head down, the way she always did, moving through the cubicles with practiced care. Her administrative badge still felt borrowed. 2 weeks wasn't enough time to belong. Rumors traveled faster than emails. New management, restructuring. Words that meant decisions would be made by people who didn't know her name. She smoothed the crease in her blouse, the one she'd ironed over the sink because the board was broken, and took her seat in the conference room when the email came through telling everyone to gather. Chairs scraped. People murmured. The door opened and the room stood as one, a reflex drilled by hierarchy. Monica stood with them and then stopped breathing. The boy from the motel walked in wearing a suit that fit like it was meant to be there. His hair was neat. His posture was calm. He wasn't a boy anymore in that room. He was introduced as Aaron Hale, operations manager sent by corporate to evaluate and reorganize. The words settled like dust. Monica felt her hands begin to shake. Erin's eyes moved across the room, professional, assessing until they met hers. There was a flicker, quick and controlled. Recognition passed between them like a held breath. Then it was gone. The meeting went on, charts, deadlines, expectations. Monica heard her name called later, a request to stop by his office. She walked the hallway, feeling the carpet give under her shoes, the walls too close. In his office, Erin stood when she entered. He closed the door. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He didn't thank her. He didn't smile. He asked about her workload. He asked about the systems she'd seen fail. He listened. When she finished, he nodded once. "Thank you for being honest," he said. When she left, her legs felt weak. The kindness she'd given had not returned as a miracle. It had returned as scrutiny. Over the next weeks, she watched him work. He asked questions others avoided. He sat in on night shifts. He noticed who spoke and who was spoken over. He saw the way certain supervisors joked when they thought no one important was listening. Monica kept her head down. She answered emails. She made no demands. The vulnerable learned early not to test the ground. One evening, she saw Erin standing in the lobby again, watching as a security guard laughed with a manager about a janitor who'd been late because his bus broke down. The laughter was casual. Cruelty didn't raise its voice. Monica felt the old tightness return. She could stay invisible. She could survive, or she could remember the rain. When the janitor was written up the next day, Monica hesitated outside Erin's office. Her hand hovered near the door. The cost of speaking was clear. She knocked anyway. She told him what she'd seen. He listened. He asked her to put it in writing. Her name at the bottom felt like a weight. That afternoon, the supervisor called her into a side room. "You need to be careful," he said, his tone friendly. "People like you don't last long when they make noise." She nodded, her throat dry. She went home that night and counted the money in her purse twice. She tucked her son in and stared at the ceiling long after he slept. The city outside kept breathing. In the morning, she sent the email. "Do you think kindness should ever cost someone their job? Or is that the price of integrity?" The cost came quietly. Her hours were adjusted. A task she'd always done well was reassigned. Jokes fell flat when she entered a room. Advice came wrapped as concern. "You don't want to get a reputation," someone whispered near the copier. Monica smiled and kept working. At night, she cleaned the same floors she walked by day, the building revealing itself in layers. She saw Erin late sometimes, alone in his office, the city reflected in the glass behind him. Once she passed the motel on her way to the bus stop and looked up at the second-floor window. The rain had stopped. The memory hadn't. At home, her son Jamal showed her a drawing of a building with windows lit. "That's where you work," he said. "You're the one cleaning it so people can see." She hugged him, breathing in the warm, familiar scent of laundry soap. Bills stacked on the counter like a dare. A letter arrived from management requesting her presence at a review meeting. The language was formal. The timing was. She folded the paper carefully and placed it under the drawing. At work, the supervisor's smile grew thinner. "Just routine," he said, eyes sliding away. Monica felt the isolation settle fully then, the sense of standing alone on a wide floor. She didn't regret the email. She regretted the math. On the night before the meeting, she stood at the bus stop and watched headlights smear across wet pavement. A man beside her muttered about lazy workers. She said nothing. She got home and opened her son's notebook, reading the list of words he'd practiced. Courage was there, spelled wrong. She corrected it in the margin. In the morning, she put on her blouse and went in early. The conference room was colder than usual. HR sat on one side. The supervisor sat on the other. Papers were arranged neatly. Monica sat and folded her hands to keep them from shaking. The supervisor cleared his throat. "Concerns have been raised," he began. He read back phrases from her email, stripped of context, made sharp. He spoke about fit, about attitude, about loyalty. Monica listened. She thought of the boy at the motel. She thought of her son's drawing. When they asked if she had anything to add, she took a breath and told the truth. She kept her voice low. She named what she'd seen. The room was silent when she finished. The HR rep nodded slowly, making notes. "We'll be in touch," she said. Monica left the room knowing the ground had shifted. At her desk, an email waited. A summons, final review, executive presence required. She stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Around her, the office hummed. She was alone in it. Have you ever done the right thing and immediately regretted it? At home that night, Jamal sat at the table coloring. Monica made dinner with careful movements as if sudden gestures might break something fragile. She watched her son chew, watched the way his brow furrowed in concentration. "Are you mad?" he asked suddenly. Monica smiled, surprised. "No," she said. "Just tired." He nodded, accepting it. After he slept, she sat on the edge of the couch and let the doubt come. She imagined losing the job. She imagined the call to the landlord. She imagined the look on her son's face. She imagined the boy in the motel room, the way he'd said thank you like it was a promise. She didn't know if she could afford to keep it. In the morning, she took Jamal to school and kissed his forehead longer than usual. "You're brave," he said, as if reminding her. She walked to the bus stop feeling the weight of the day ahead. The executive meeting was set for noon. She arrived early, the building quieter at that hour. The conference room was larger than the others, glass walls, a long table. She took a seat at the far end. People filed in, faces she didn't recognize. The supervisor avoided her eyes. HR sat stiffly. The door opened last. Aaron entered carrying a folder. He took a seat at the head of the table. He didn't look at Monica right away. He nodded to the room. "Let's begin," he said. The supervisor launched into his summary, confident, rehearsed. He spoke about policy, about disruption, about professionalism. Aaron listened without interrupting, his hands folded. When the supervisor finished, Aaron opened his folder. He slid a document across the table. "Before we discuss outcomes," he said, "I want to play something." He connected his laptop to the screen. Audio filled the room. The supervisor's voice echoed, casual and dismissive. "People like that are always late." Laughter. The security guard's voice. A date and time stamped below. Silence fell heavy. Aaron let it sit. He looked around the table. "This is not an isolated incident," he said calmly. He clicked through emails, logs, reports. He read aloud the phrase the clerk had used at the motel, the same bored cruelty now echoed in corporate language. "We don't rent to problems," he repeated, then met the supervisor's eyes. "Is that your understanding of leadership?" The supervisor stammered. HR shifted. Aaron turned then, finally, to Monica. "Ms. Reed," he said, using her name. "Thank you for documenting what you saw." The room watched. The power moved. Aaron stood. "This meeting is not about punishing honesty," he said. "It's about correcting abuse." He outlined consequences, specific, measured. The supervisor was placed on leave pending investigation. Policies were cited, training mandated, transparency promised. It wasn't loud, it was thorough. When it was over, Aaron addressed the room. "Kindness under pressure is not a liability," he said. "It's a standard." He dismissed them. Monica remained seated until the room emptied. Aaron approached. He lowered his voice. "You didn't know who I was," he said. "That matters." She nodded, unable to speak. "Neither did they," he added. "The justice was public. It was undeniable. It did not erase the cost. It honored it." Who would be affected most if this decision went wrong? In the weeks that followed, changes took root slowly. Aaron didn't elevate Monica with spectacle. He asked her to join a working group. He gave her responsibility, not praise. Her hours stabilized. Her role expanded. People began to ask her opinion and wait for the answer. One afternoon, she found a note on her desk. It was a copy of the receipt from the motel, framed simply. On the back, a line written in careful hand. "I'm still here. Thank you." She tucked it into her bag. At home, Jamal added another window to his drawing. "That's your office," he said. Monica smiled, the release quiet and real. At this moment, what do you think should happen to the hero? The building changed, not completely, but enough to notice. Training sessions replaced jokes. Complaints were logged and answered. The security guard apologized to the janitor, awkward and sincere. The supervisor's office remained empty. Monica walked the halls with a different posture, not taller but steadier. One evening, she passed the motel again. The clerk was different. The sign flickered. She didn't go in. Some places were for memory. At work, Aaron announced a new initiative, crediting the team. He never told her story for her. He let it exist. At a staff meeting, someone repeated the phrase that had started it all, this time with irony. "We don't rent to problems," they said, shaking their head. The room understood. Power had shifted its language. Monica felt the truth of it settle. It wasn't magic, it was work. Was this justice, or was it overdue? The promotion came quietly, a title that fit the work she'd been doing. The raise helped. The dignity mattered more. She told Jamal at dinner. He grinned, sauce on his chin. I knew it, he said. She laughed, the sound surprising her. At night she still cleaned sometimes, choosing the extra hours when she could. The building felt different under her hands. In Aaron's office, a photo sat on the shelf. A rain-streaked window, a city blurred. He never explained it. She never asked. They spoke as colleagues. Respect settled into routine. What do you think matters more, money or being seen? Years later, the drawing still hung on the fridge, replaced by newer ones but kept. The building had new leadership, new challenges. Monica trained new hires, teaching them how to document, how to listen. She kept the receipt framed in her desk drawer. Sometimes she took it out and remembered the rain. The boy was a man now, no longer defined by a night on steps. The city kept moving. Systems bent slowly, then held. One decision threaded through lives like a quiet seam. Sometimes the night kindness almost costs you everything is the night it quietly gives you a future you never planned for. The shift in the office was subtle enough that no one named it out loud, but Monica felt it immediately, the way a room changes temperature without any window opening. Conversations lowered when she passed. A laugh would start and then stall, unfinished, as if someone had pressed pause. Her name stopped appearing on group emails she used to be copied on automatically. Tasks she handled every morning were reassigned without explanation, handed to people who avoided meeting her eyes when they walked by her desk. None of it was dramatic, that was the point. Power rarely announced itself when it punished. It preferred the quiet erosion of belonging. Monica kept working. She answered what came to her. She stayed late when asked. She wrote everything down. The notebook in her bag grew heavier, not with secrets, but with dates, times, exact words. She had learned the difference between memory and proof. At lunch, she sat alone, scrolling through her phone without reading, listening to the hum of other people's comfort. Once she overheard her supervisor say her name followed by a sigh, the sound of inconvenience. She means well, he said, as if that were the problem. Another voice replied, some people don't know their place. Monica felt the words land on her back like a hand meant to guide her elsewhere. She didn't turn around. She finished her coffee and went back to her desk. The building felt larger now, the ceilings higher, the distance between her chair and the exit longer. At night when she cleaned, she noticed new signs posted about professionalism and conduct. They were framed nicely, the language polished. She wondered who they were for. One evening, the supervisor stopped her near the supply closet. His tone was friendly, practiced. You okay? He asked. She nodded. Just checking, he said. Change can be hard for some folks. He smiled and walked away. Monica stood there holding a roll of paper towels, her hands steady, her chest tight. She thought of the email she'd sent, the words stripped of emotion, the facts lined up like witnesses. She thought of how easily those facts could be reframed as attitude. The next morning, her schedule changed again. Fewer hours. A note from HR arrived asking her to confirm availability. The language was neutral. The message was not. At home, she recalculated the month, the numbers refusing to bend. Jamal asked if they could go to the movies like they'd planned. Monica hesitated just long enough for him to notice. It's okay, he said quickly. We can go later. She smiled and said later was good. That night after he slept, she opened her notebook and added another line. She didn't cry. She couldn't afford the time. At work, the jokes sharpened. A coworker left a sticky note on her desk that said whistleblower with a smiley face drawn too carefully. She peeled it off and threw it away. Another warned her quietly near the elevators. They're watching you, she whispered. Monica nodded. She already knew. The isolation was complete when a project she'd helped design was presented without her name. She watched from the back of the room as her ideas were praised, attributed to someone else. Her hands curled in her lap. She said nothing. After the meeting, Aaron passed her in the hallway. He slowed just a fraction. Are you holding up? He asked, his voice low. Monica met his eyes. I am, she said. It wasn't entirely true. He nodded once as if understanding the cost of the lie. Document everything, he said, quietly enough that it sounded like advice, not instruction. The words steadied her. That afternoon, she received the calendar invite for the review meeting. Executive presence required. The phrase sat on the screen like a verdict waiting to be read. Around her, the office buzzed with ordinary concerns. Someone complained about the printer. Someone else planned a birthday lunch. Monica closed her email and finished her work. When she stood to leave, the supervisor called after her. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. On the bus ride home, the city slid past, indifferent. Monica rested her head against the window and watched the reflections merge. She thought of the motel lobby, the clerk's casual cruelty. She thought of the boy's bowed head. She wondered how many people had been told without words that they were problems. At home, Jamal was asleep on the couch, his homework neatly stacked. She covered him with a blanket and sat beside him, listening to his breathing. The future felt narrow, but it was still there. In the morning, she would show up. She always did. She set her alarm and turned off the light, the weight of the coming day pressing in, her resolve quiet but unbroken. Have you ever done the right thing and immediately regretted it? Monica's life outside the building had always been smaller than the one inside it, not in importance but in margin. There was no buffer. Every decision leaned directly against someone she loved. After the review meeting was scheduled, that truth pressed closer. At home, the heater rattled and went silent again. The repairman's estimate folded on the counter like a warning she hadn't answered. Jamal sat at the table doing homework, his pencil worn short from use, his feet swinging just above the floor. He liked to talk while he worked, narrating his thoughts as if the world listened better when spoken to directly. "If I finish this early," he said, not looking up, "can I draw after?" Monica nodded, her hands busy folding laundry she'd washed in the sink. The smell of detergent was sharp and clean, a small victory. She watched him carefully, the way parents do when they are counting both time and money without letting it show. He drew buildings most nights, tall ones, always with lights on. Sometimes he added stick figures inside the windows, all upright, all safe. She wondered when he'd started noticing how often she came home tired. He didn't ask questions he didn't want the answers to. Later, after dinner, he handed her a new drawing. It was the building again, but this time one window was darker than the others. "That's when you're still cleaning," he said. Monica swallowed. "You don't have to stay up for me," she said gently. He shrugged. "I like knowing you're there." When he went to bed, she sat alone at the table, the drawing spread in front of her. She traced the lines with her finger, thinking about the review meeting, about how words spoken in clean rooms could undo lives lived carefully. She thought about calling in sick, about apologizing for making things uncomfortable, about staying quiet until the storm passed. The thought settled briefly, seductive in its simplicity. Then she imagined explaining it to Jamal, not the details, just the feeling. She imagined telling him she looked away. The idea didn't hold. The next day she walked him to school, holding his hand longer than usual. At the gate he stopped and looked up at her. "You're not in trouble, right?" he asked. The question landed softly and hard at the same time. Monica knelt to his level. "No," she said, choosing the truth she could keep. "I'm doing something important." He nodded, satisfied, and ran off without looking back. On the bus, Monica watched her reflection in the glass, the lines at the corners of her eyes deeper than she remembered. She thought of her own mother, of lessons learned without being taught. That afternoon, she received a call from the school about a field trip deposit due soon. She wrote the amount on a scrap of paper and added it to the pile. At work, the tension followed her like a shadow. People avoided conversation. A few offered tight smiles. One coworker slipped her a note of encouragement, folded small enough to fit in a pocket. It said simply, "I see you." Monica held on to it longer than she needed to. That evening, she cleaned the executive floor alone. The city beyond the windows glowed, distant and indifferent. She paused by a conference room and looked at her reflection layered over the skyline. She thought of the boy at the motel, of how close kindness had come to costing her everything. She thought of how much she still stood to lose. When she got home, Jamal was asleep, his drawing pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star. Monica stood there for a long moment, then turned off the light. In the dark, doubt came back, quieter now, less persuasive. She lay down and stared at the ceiling, listening to the building settle, and made her decision without ceremony. Whatever happened in that room tomorrow, she would not erase herself to survive it. She closed her eyes, holding that resolve the way she held her son's hand firmly, without apology. Who would be affected most if this decision went wrong? The summons arrived first thing in the morning, printed and placed face down on her desk as if the paper itself were dangerous. Executive review. Noon. Conference room. See. Monica read it once, then again, the words refusing to change. Around her, keyboards clicked, phones rang, the ordinary machinery of work continuing without her. She folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her bag. The hours stretched, each minute distinct. She answered emails. She organized files that might never be opened again by her hands. She noticed the way people watched her now, openly, no longer pretending neutrality. A few looked away quickly, others didn't. At 11:58 she stood. The walk to the conference room felt longer than it ever had, the carpet muffling her steps, the glass walls reflecting her back at herself. She paused outside the door and took one slow breath, steadying her hands by pressing her fingertips together. Inside, the room was already occupied. HR sat at one end of the table, posture rigid, folders aligned. Two executives Monica had never met murmured quietly to each other. Her supervisor sat closest to the door, leaning back, arms crossed, confidence arranged carefully on his face. No one smiled when she entered. She took the seat farthest from them, the one that made her feel smallest, and placed her bag at her feet. The door closed with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. The HR representative began, voice measured, rehearsed. She spoke about concerns, about reports, about the importance of cohesion. She used words like perception and tone and alignment. Monica listened, her gaze fixed on the grain of the table. When the supervisor spoke, his voice carried a practiced disappointment. He described disruption, insubordination framed as initiative gone too far. He spoke about loyalty as if it were a one-way street. Monica noticed how easily he avoided specifics, how he never named the incident, only the inconvenience it caused. When they asked her to respond, the room held its breath. Monica lifted her head. She spoke slowly, choosing precision over defense. She described what she'd seen, what she'd heard, when and where. She did not raise her voice. She did not apologize. She felt the imbalance acutely, the way authority leaned forward expecting her to shrink. When she finished, silence settled, heavy and uncomfortable. The HR representative thanked her and said they would deliberate. Monica nodded, already bracing for the outcome she'd rehearsed in the dark. The door opened then, unexpectedly. Footsteps approached, unhurried. Aaron Hale entered the room. He didn't rush. He didn't apologize for being late. The conversation stopped as if cut cleanly. He took in the scene with a single glance and moved to the head of the table. "I'll take it from here," he said calmly. No one objected. The power in the room shifted, subtle but undeniable, like a current changing direction. Monica felt her pulse quicken, uncertainty colliding with something like relief. Aaron placed a folder on the table and met her eyes briefly, a look that held no promises, only acknowledgement. He turned to the others, his posture relaxed, his voice even. "Before any decisions are made," he said, "there are some things we need to review." The supervisor's confidence wavered, just slightly. Monica sat very still, aware that whatever came next would not be quiet. "At this moment, what do you think should happen to the hero?" Aaron did not raise his voice. He did not gesture dramatically or let the moment swell. He simply opened the folder and slid the first document into the center of the table, turning it so everyone could see. "This is an internal incident report," he said, "filed 3 weeks ago." The supervisor leaned forward, recognition flickering across his face before he could stop it. HR shifted in their chairs. Aaron continued, his tone steady, almost instructional. "It documents a conversation between a security officer and a department manager in the main lobby after hours. The audio was captured by the building's own system." He pressed a key. The room filled with sound. The supervisor's voice, unmistakable, casual, almost amused. "People like that are always late. You give them an inch and they take a mile." A soft laugh followed. Someone else added, "Yeah, you can't rent to problems." The phrase landed with a dull thud, familiar and ugly. Monica felt her breath catch. Aaron let the recording play to the end, then stopped it without comment. No one spoke. The supervisor's mouth opened and closed once, words failing to arrive on schedule. Aaron turned a page. "This next document," he said, "is an email chain discussing the reassignment of duties from Ms. Reed to another employee without performance cause less than 48 hours after she filed a factual report." He looked directly at HR. "This constitutes retaliation." The words sat plainly between them, stripped of drama. HR glanced down at the paper, then back up, their expression tightening. Aaron wasn't finished. He projected a screen onto the wall, a timeline assembling itself piece by piece. Dates, times, names, patterns emerging where coincidence had been claimed. He read aloud excerpts from performance reviews, including Monica's, consistent, positive, unremarkable in the way competence often is. Then he read the warning note, the reduced hours, the calendar invite for executive review. "This is how power hides," he said quietly, not accusing, not emotional. "It uses process to punish conscience." The supervisor finally found his voice. "This is being taken out of context," he said too quickly. "We were joking. No one was targeted." Aaron nodded once, as if acknowledging a familiar argument. "Context matters," he agreed. "Which is why we looked beyond one incident." He clicked again. Another recording, another casual dismissal, another laugh. Then a transcript from the motel across the street, a complaint filed months earlier by a guest who'd overheard a clerk say the same words. "We don't rent to problems." Aaron looked back at the supervisor. "You used that phrase," he said evenly. "Multiple times in multiple settings." He paused. "Do you still consider it a joke?" The supervisor's face flushed, then drained. HR cleared their throat. One of the executives shifted forward, eyes narrowed now, attention fully engaged. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Aaron turned slightly, addressing everyone at once. "Ms. Reed reported behavior that violates both company policy and basic professional ethics," he said. "She did so without anonymity, without protection, and without leverage." He glanced at Monica again, brief and respectful. What followed was not discipline. It was punishment. He closed the folder. The sound was soft but final. "Effective immediately," he said. "The supervisor in question is placed on administrative leave pending formal investigation." The supervisor started to protest, hands lifting from the table, but Aaron raised a finger, not sharply, just enough. "This is not a discussion," he said. "HR will coordinate next steps. Access will be suspended today." He turned to the executives. "I will submit a full report to corporate with recommendations for structural changes, including mandatory bias training and revised reporting protections." One of the executives nodded slowly. HR scribbled notes, their earlier rigidity replaced by urgency. The supervisor sank back in his chair, the confidence he'd worn so carefully now gone, replaced by something smaller, harder to name. Aaron didn't look at him again. He addressed the room. "This meeting was convened under the assumption that silence was the safest outcome," he said. "It is not." He let the statement hang, then added, "Accountability does not require anger, it requires clarity." He turned to Monica then fully, not as a symbol, not as a case, but as a person. "Ms. Reed," he said, "thank you for your restraint and your precision. You did exactly what the system claims it wants and rarely protects." The words were simple. They landed with weight. Monica felt a warmth spread through her chest, not relief exactly, but recognition. Around the table, eyes shifted toward her, some surprised, some thoughtful, some uncomfortable. The power had moved and everyone could feel it. Aaron gathered his materials and stood. "We are done here," he said. "HR will follow up." The executives rose with him. The supervisor remained seated, staring at the table as if it had betrayed him. Monica stood last, her legs unsteady but holding. As she walked out, the hallway seemed brighter, the glass walls less oppressive. People looked up from their desks, sensing something had changed. The door to the conference room closed behind her, not with a click this time, but with a sound that felt like release. The justice delivered was not loud. It did not erase the past weeks of fear or the nights of doubt. It did something quieter and more permanent. It named the harm. It shifted the rules. It made retreat impossible. Monica paused by the window overlooking the city, the rain finally gone, the streets below moving on as they always did. She placed a hand against the cool glass and breathed, steady and deep, knowing that what had just happened could not be undone, and that for once, that was enough. Was this justice, or was it overdue? The weeks that followed did not arrive with applause or sudden ease. There were no emails announcing heroes, no speeches carved into memory. Change came the way it usually does when it is real, incremental, procedural, quietly exhausting. Monica returned to her desk the next morning to find her schedule restored without comment. The reassigned tasks came back to her queue, one by one, as if nothing unusual had happened. An updated org chart appeared in everyone's inbox that afternoon. Her name was still where it had been, but a small line beneath it now read Interim Process Lead. No congratulations followed, just expectation. She read the title twice, then closed the email and kept working. Later, Aaron stopped by her desk, not standing over her, just leaning lightly against the divider like anyone else. "This isn't a reward," he said softly, as if clarifying something important. "It's responsibility," Monica nodded. "I know," she said. Watched her a moment longer. "That's why I asked you," he replied, then moved on. The weight of it settled slowly. Meetings filled her calendar. People who had once avoided her now asked for guidance, careful, respectful. She noticed who struggled with the shift, who resisted without words. She documented, she listened, she corrected where needed. When someone joked in a meeting about people being too sensitive, she didn't flinch. She asked them to explain. The room went quiet. The joke didn't return. HR followed through on training. The security guard apologized publicly to the janitor during a staff forum, his voice shaking just enough to be sincere. The apology didn't erase the harm, but it acknowledged it, and that mattered. Monica didn't smile. She took notes. At home, Jamal noticed the difference before she said anything. She came home earlier some nights. She sat at the table with him while he did his homework instead of folding laundry nearby. "Did you get a new job?" he asked one evening. Monica shook her head. "Same job," she said, "just more trust." He considered that, then nodded. "Trust is good," he said, returning to his work. The heater was fixed the following week, paid for in installments she could manage. She pinned Jamal's newest drawing to the fridge, this one showing a building with a small figure standing firmly at the door. At work, Aaron called her into his office again, this time with the door open. He reviewed a proposal she drafted, his questions direct, his feedback specific. When they finished, he slid the paper back to her. "You didn't just report a problem," he said. "You saw how it worked and chose not to become it." Monica held the paper carefully like it might tear. "I just told the truth," she said. Aaron shook his head. "That's not just," he replied. Recognition came in other ways. A senior executive asked for her input on a new reporting protocol. A junior staff member thanked her quietly for making it easier to speak. The building itself seemed to breathe differently, not healed but aware. Monica still cleaned some nights, choosing the work when she needed the hours or the quiet. One evening she found herself on the executive floor again, wiping down a long table after a late meeting. She paused, looking at the faint reflection of her hands in the polished surface. The table hadn't changed. She had. There was no fantasy wealth waiting, no sudden escape from responsibility. There was trust, fragile and earned. There was dignity that did not depend on permission. One afternoon, Aaron placed a small envelope on her desk without comment. Inside was the original receipt from the motel, now laminated, a simple note written beneath it. "Leadership is who you are when no one is watching." She closed the envelope and put it in her bag. That night she showed it to Jamal. He traced the plastic edge with his finger. "That's when you helped someone," he said. Monica nodded. "Yes," she said. "And when someone helped me." She sat on the couch after he went to bed, the apartment warm and quiet, and felt the release finally come. Not tears, not celebration, just the easing of a long-held breath. The future was still uncertain. The world had not softened, but she was no longer invisible. She was trusted to see clearly and act anyway. That was the reward. It was enough. What do you think matters more, money or being seen? Time did what it always did after disruption. It smoothed the sharpest edges and left the shape of what had happened intact. Months passed, then a year, and the building settled into new habits that no longer felt new. Reporting channels were used instead of whispered. Training became routine instead of reactionary. Some people left, choosing comfort elsewhere. Others stayed and adjusted, learning what accountability required of them. Monica remained, not as a symbol but as a presence that changed the temperature of rooms simply by entering them. Her role became permanent, the interim label removed without ceremony. She trained new hires with patience and specificity, teaching them how systems failed quietly and how to notice the moment before that failure became harm. She kept her notebook, though it grew thinner now, filled less with caution and more with planning. At home, Jamal grew taller, his drawings changing too. The buildings softened, becoming schools, libraries, places with open doors. One afternoon, he handed her a sketch of a woman standing in front of a building, keys in her hand. "That's you," he said, matter of fact. Monica laughed softly and pinned it beside the others. She still passed the motel sometimes, the sign replaced, the lobby renovated. She never went in. Some kindness was meant to remain anonymous, even in memory. At work, Aaron eventually moved on, promoted again, his time in the building becoming one chapter among many. On his last day, he stopped by Monica's office. He didn't bring speeches, he shook her hand. "You already know this," he said, "but don't let them turn you into policy." She smiled. "I won't," she said. After he left, she opened her drawer and took out the laminated receipt. The ink had faded slightly, the edges worn smooth. She held it for a moment, then placed it back, closing the drawer gently. Years later, when Jamal asked her why she always paused before unlocking their apartment door, she told him the truth in simple terms. "I like remembering that we got here," she said. The city outside continued its noise and movement, injustices still unfolding, kindness still costly. But somewhere in that movement, a system had learned, briefly and imperfectly, to listen. And a boy who once stood soaked in rain had grown into a man who understood that power did not begin at the door of an office. It began in the moment someone chose not to look away.